Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and we got a great one for you today. Today, we actually connect with J. Alain Smith. If you don't know him, he is the host of Rugged Expeditions. He's a hunter, a writer, a musician, and most of all, an adventurer. And he actually reached out to me and said, hey, I've got some fun stories for you. I'd love to come on your podcast. And he didn't disappoint. In fact, tonight we have our first polar bear hunt. So super fun stories. And I guarantee you we're going to have Alain back on the podcast because we only touched just a very small portion, I think 3 or 4 stories, of what has been a very long and exciting hunting career. So I want to say first off, thank you to Alain for coming on the podcast. Super excited to connect with him and excited to have him back. For you listeners, thank you guys for tuning in. You know what? Let's just jump into this thing and let Alain tell you some of his stories. Thank you. All right, Alain, welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How are you?
It's a great day in the Northwest. It's summertime here. So we've got, 89 degrees. The Seattle area of the Northwest gets trashed a lot for it raining all the time. And we tell everybody from other places that, yes, it rains every single day. Don't move here. But we actually have good summers. We got no snakes, no tornadoes, no bugs. It's pretty good. It's just that you don't want to be here January, February, March.
Yeah. No, I told you briefly before we started recording, I lived in Washington for almost 5 years, from July 5th to like October 30th. The most beautiful place in the world. Just absolutely spectacular. But the rest of the time, it's just gloomy. And it doesn't rain that much. You know that New York City gets more annual rainfall than Seattle does? Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. It's just always gloomy. It was too much for my wife, who's like a Texas bird. She just needed sunshine and heat. So that's basically why we moved away. But that summer there in Washington, there's nothing like it. So I bet you are having a beautiful day. I'm in Colorado now. It's been 90 for like a month. But today we're having a cold front, so it's rainy. I got your Seattle weather down here in Denver, so it's rainy and like 60 degrees.
Send some of that up north. We need it for the duck fields.
There you go. Yeah. All right. Well, let's kick this thing off. Why don't you introduce yourself, Mr. J. Alain Smith, so that people know, if they don't already know who you are, can know who they're going to be hearing stories from today.
So let's see, where did I start? I'm a big game hunter and musician, writer. Written some novels and some hunting books, and I've got a YouTube channel that's doing really great for my show, Rugged Expeditions. Mm-hmm. We're also on Carbon TV, and we're also on Amazon Prime. You can see us on there as well. And so we started doing the filming for that about 13, 14 years ago.
Okay.
And the show was one of those things where you're sitting around the fire with a bunch of buddies complaining about whitetail shows. How many times can you watch a guy shoot a whitetail with a mouthful of corn from a tree stand with a bow? Yeah. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's funner than hell and love doing it. But, every show was pretty much the same. So, we got trashing them, and somebody said, well, maybe if you think you don't like them, you should do one yourself. And I said, well, maybe I just will. And
there you go.
So one thing led to another, and all of a sudden, I got a TV show. We were originally on Sportsman's Channel.
Okay.
And then switched to streaming about 6-7 years ago, I think now. And that's been way more productive and a lot more views. You reach the whole world that way. And
absolutely. And you have some great episodes. I've been diving into it. I think the first one I clicked on, you're like, we haven't been here in 18 years ago. And 18 years ago, we got in a plane accident. And I'm like, what am I getting into here? Like this, you've got a lot of really fun stuff. So for the viewers or the listeners, make sure you guys go and check it out. I'll put a link to everything in the show notes, but you do have a fun show. So thanks for putting that together, especially for as long as you've been doing it.
Yeah, that was the classic. When that show you're talking about specifically, I love being in Tanzania, favorite place in the whole world. And, shooting Cape Buffalo is the most fun you can have with your pants on. So we had been there years ago and I had my brother and my nephew and some other friends on this plane, and the pilot brought it in with the wind at the tail.
Yeah.
And, which for anybody who flies or has ever flown a kite knows that nothing flies that well doing that. And we were heavy. We had 11 people on a Navajo. And so anyhow, we hit the end of the runway because he couldn't put it down, and into the trees and brush we went. And, we had it filmed actually. My brother was recording from the front seat, and it goes, well, you'll see in the show, but it goes from, hey, we're going really fast, and a bunch of yelling and cussing, and then boom, and then everything goes black from
Yeah.
the dust and everything. But
Yeah. And then you just hear, everybody okay? Everybody okay?
yeah,
It was a fun episode. And then, of course, it's a water buffalo episode. And then the next thing you're doing is shooting dove in Africa. And I was like, man, that looks like a ton of fun. So, yeah, I don't want to steal too much thunder from the episode itself. I recommend everybody go out and check out all of your episodes because I'm sure you have a big catalog. I have plenty more to catch up on. But yeah, it was fun to watch.
Yeah, thank you. We've tried to go with a variety too. It's not all just Cape buffalo in Africa. We've got some sheep from around the world. We've got ibex, some bird hunting, fishing shows. We tried to mix it up. There
Yeah.
are a lot of African shows on there, but there is Central Asia and stuff like that, and Pakistan and some other exotic places for wacky animals. So
That's
it's
amazing.
a little variety, something for everybody, hopefully.
A lot of those bucket list hunts for everybody, the stuff that everybody wants to go do at some point. You're just out there doing it. So I'm jealous. But yeah, let's talk about your favorite stories, Alan. Where do you want to set the stage here? Let's just dive into it. And it doesn't matter why it's the story you want to tell, as long as it's one you love telling.
For starters, I'd like to start with my worst hunt ever.
Perfect. Those are always my favorite.
And it's kind of sad because it was one of the ones that I'd really looked forward to. And I went polar bear hunting up in the Arctic.
Wow.
And this was in the late 80s. And you couldn't bring them back at the time. But, it was a bucket list thing. So I went up to the end of the Perry Peninsula and hunted with some locals there. And I got there, and they were supposed to have those caribou skin clothes for you, the hood and the parka and the fur around the edge. And I'd sent the money in advance in my sizes to, make all the stuff. But having been in a lot of indigenous areas before, I made sure that I brought my own stuff just in case. And thank God I did, because when I got there, none of the stuff was done or even started. So that was it for the, cool clothing that was going to keep me warm. It was minus 35 the whole time we were there.
What month of the year were you there?
That was in late March, early April.
Okay.
The idea being that that's when you still have hard ice, but you have enough daylight that you can get out and hunt.
Okay.
So
how long were the days?
I want to say they were about 9-10 hours. Then that bracket.
Okay.
They weren't. It wasn't like short like it is earlier, and in those days you could only use a dog team. You couldn't use snow machines.
Okay.
So we got hooked up with the dog team, and that was a whole cluster. Rode snow machines to the end of the land, and then they had a little cabin there, and then we got all the dogs hooked up, and you just go out on the ice and you start looking for tracks.
Oh, interesting.
And we had 2 dog teams, 2 sleds. I rode in one with one guy, and then another guy followed us. So our total camp consisted of 1 4-man pup tent with 3 of us in it. We had no heater.
Oh my God.
We had a Coleman stove, and that was the only heat that we had.
I wouldn't be at negative 35. That propane might even freeze, right? Like that. Ugh.
It's amazing what happens. I mean, steel breaks and stuff like that. I mean, it's so literally when you spit, it freezes in the air before it hits the ground.
Jeez, man.
That kind of cold. Your nose is, your snot's frozen all the time.
Yeah.
So, and you're all covered up and you got face masks on and all that stuff to try and, get by. Uh, and sunny the whole time. That was, the good news. It's the Arctic is a desert, not a lot of rainfall or anything or any snowfall. But anyhow, so we got up there, started looking for tracks, and talk about real adventure. One other thing that people don't realize about the ice is that it's not smooth like you would think. Oh, the ocean, it's just this big, vast, flat as a football field in any direction. And it's not, because of the tides and the wind. The ice is actually breaking up and has fissures in it. And when the wind blows it, it crushes together and forms ridges, these pressure
Okay.
ridges, they call them.
Huh. Never thought about that. You're right. I did assume it was just this big flat tundra, basically. That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's not. And the problem with that is that, of course, when you're on a dog team and you come to this big pressure ridge that's, 20 miles long or however long it is, you don't go around it. You got to try and find a way to get through it.
Yeah.
So you got a dozen dogs that are all tied up, and you're trying to pull the sled over it, unload all the crap, carry it over the pressure ridge to the next flat area. The good thing is you warmed up really quick from sweating with all the clothes you had on and everything, but it was a nightmare. And these dogs that they use are just wild. They're like trying to hook up wolves. These dogs, they wouldn't even let me go in and help them hook them up because these dogs are just full tilt. They'll bite your arm off. I mean,
no way.
Just mean.
What's the distance between these pressure ridges, right? So like, is it every 10 feet you're having to hop over one, or is it like they're maybe a quarter of a mile apart?
Yeah, really no rhyme or reason. There might be none for 2 miles, and then you hit 3 in a row. And then there's a half mile between this one or the other one, or you just go around the smaller ones with the dog team. But even turning them and trying to do anything, it's just. And then every night, of course, you got to take them all off there, peg them to the ice, feed them. They fed them fox carcasses because they're trapping foxes up there all the time, and so they take the skin off and then they just throw them a frozen fox, and that's what they have for dinner every night.
Gnaw on it all night long. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Do the dogs have any kind of protection from the cold, or are they just bred up there and that's just what they do?
That's where they live. And
man, animals are hardcore. That's
they
crazy.
roll up and put their tail over their face and make a pile of snow that they kind of run around in a circle, get this little bit of snow up in the air, and then they lay down and it comes on and covers them up, and the cloud of snow, and they're all covered up, and that's where they sleep.
That's amazing. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So many questions. I've never had a polar bear hunt on my podcast before. This is cool. Keep going.
Yeah. So the other thing that was really weird is, as I was talking about where the ice is broken up, you would be going on the ice and you come in a crack, it might be a couple inches long or something like that, or wide. So you just go right across it, and the ice is real thick. So you're not afraid of it breaking or anything. But one time we were making this big circle, and we went back to follow our track back to where we had left some of the camp and the one guy. And when we came back, following our own track, there was no track beyond the crack because the ice is moving all the time.
Oh,
and
wow.
Our track had moved, a couple miles away. So you came to the crack and it just dead ended. You're like, what the hell happened here?
Yeah.
But that shows you how much the ice is moving while you're out there.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, whole another added twist. Now the local guys, the Eskimos, I mean, they're so hip to their environment. They knew where to go, but I was semi-panicking going, uh-oh.
Right?
Now
so you left a guy behind. That guy could be 2 miles away just because the ice shifting?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Just moved away. So anyhow, we did that, and but we got back to camp, and then finally on the 8th day, we found a good bear. You look for the track, and if it's a small track, you don't bother. Or if you see that it's mother and a couple cubs, you don't bother with them. But we finally found a good track, and we followed it for about 6-7 hours, and finally jumped the bear. He was laying in one of those pressure ridges, kind of out of the wind. And he got up and he ran down the length of the pressure ridge, looking back over his shoulder. And it was weird that you forget also that bear has never seen a human being.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
He's never seen other than maybe a wolf, he's out on the ice and he's eating seals. That's all they eat. They
Okay.
rarely come to the mainland or to soil, especially the big bears. So he was kind of running. Then he'd be kind of curious. Well, they turn a couple of them dogs loose. They just cut him loose and they chase after him, try and bring him to bay.
Yeah.
So I get off the sled, with my rifle, thinking, I'm going to whack this thing if he stops. Well, he runs too far away. The dogs are running after him. He goes down to the end of the pressure ridge, and now he's coming back down the other side of the pressure ridge, and I'm standing there, and he's coming full tilt, but he's not charging. He's just running, and he's looking
Yeah.
back at the dogs. Finally, at like 30 yards, I'm going, hey, bear. I need him to
Yeah.
stop. And literally straight at me. So he comes to a screeching halt. He stands up as bears do and is swaying on his back feet. And I'm looking at
They're
him.
like 12 feet tall, right?
Yeah, call it. Well, yeah, from toe to head. Yeah, squared
Okay.
out for about 9 to 10 feet. When you're
Okay.
flattening them out. But
Yeah.
yeah, huge. They're as big as a brown bear. And so he stands up and he's doing that weaving thing, where he's waving back and forth. He's trying to smell me, and I've got the wind, so he can't. But he's looking and he can't figure out what I am. Then he looks back and he sees these dogs coming. So he gets down on all four and he starts pounding his feet on the ice like a barrel, huffing like this, trying to scare me, which he did a good job of doing.
I bet.
And the Eskimo, now he's come up over the top of the ridge and he's yelling, shit, shit. And it was one of those deals where the animal was so cool. I'm looking at him going, I can't believe this. It's a polar bear right there. And now he's at like, I don't know, 20 yards, something like that.
Jeez,
and he's
way too close.
walking back and forth and he's turning around. And like, I didn't really want to shoot him. You know what I mean? It was such a cool sight to see. I'm there to hunt and I wanted to, but I just sat there and looked at him and this Eskimo was going berserk. So finally, the bear got down and he'd had enough and he just started to come. He put his head down and just started running at me. So I put one right above his head into his hump, and then he spun up and I stuck another one in the center of his chest. And so,
what caliber were you using?
375 H&H.
Okay.
Yeah, the best caliber ever.
Yeah. Did it just drop him in his tracks, or what happened after the second shot?
The first one clipped his spine, so he's in pretty rough shape. And then when he was getting back up, when he had his head up, then I put another one in the center of his chest. And yeah, that was it. He didn't go, 5 feet. But then, of course, the other thing that's weird about that with how cold it is that you never think about is at 35 below, when you're skinning, you've got to skin as fast as you can and get that thing off the hide off the body, because the body's warm. So we took maybe, like, it's the least amount of pictures I've ever taken in my life. Thank God one of them turned out nice. But it was, so cold that as you're laying the skin down, it's freezing into a piece of plywood. You can't fold it. You can't do nothing with it. So as we were skinning, they would roll it at the same time. So one guy was rolling and me and the head guy, Tony, we were, skinning the thing out and fleshing it as best we could. And then when we got it back into the village later, the beautiful town of Pawlatuck, there we put it in his garage and, warmed it up again. And then we finished all the fleshing and got all the fat off it and everything else. So.
Okay. That's the craziest thing. Do people eat polar bears? I know that, like, brown bears, yes, absolutely. Or excuse me, black bears, yes, absolutely. Brown bears, not so much. Does anyone out there eat polar bears?
No.
No.
We took
but they taste pretty gross. Yeah.
Yeah, we took a couple of pieces off of it just to say we did. They want nothing to do with it. They did take the meat, to feed the dogs.
Yeah.
We didn't leave it. But it's, they eat seals. And they taste gross. Like a seal. And seal meat, for all of you out there that have never had the pleasure of eating seal oil or seal meat or muktuk or seal fat, it's an acquired taste, let's say.
Yeah. Gosh, how much does that cape and head and paws all weigh? Because I'm just thinking, now you're miles out here. You got to go over these ridges, and now you've got this 200-pound,
exactly
300-pound cape with you that you got to get over there too.
I want to say because we had to leave the skull in it, we couldn't get it off fast enough. It was It was over 200, 210 or 215, something like that,
Yeah,
if I remember right.
jeez.
But the good news is 2 years later, Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, opened it up to where you could import polar bears again. And it was just a
Oh,
window for a couple of years. I want to say it was 92-ish. And so I got the skin back from it
that's interesting.
eventually. And in that short window that they were open. So that was great.
That's
So,
funny. That reminds me of a story. My father-in-law, he passed away last year, but he lived in Canada. And I don't remember all of the details, but what you just mentioned reminded me of this. He had a hunter who had killed two polar bears and had two polar bear hides. And the guy was like, "Here's the deal: if you can somehow get these to America, you can have one of them." So my father-in-law had a polar bear hide. I don't recall how he got them to the States, but he did manage to get both the hides across, and the guy was, honored his word and gave him one of the hides. I do think he eventually sold it. But yeah, he did it during that time frame that you couldn't bring that kind of stuff across the borders, but he
yeah.
somehow did.
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, right. I got to
Well,
ask
well,
his
well, well,
wife
well.
and see if she remembers any of the details, because I'd completely forgotten about that story until you mentioned that.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a
Well,
great adventure. But it's one of those hunts that you're not going to do a second time. Like,
yeah,
thank
that
God
was
I
my
got one.
question. Would you ever do
'Cause,
it again?
no, if they were giving away $1 million to go do it, no, I'm out. It just was not. There was nothing. It was the challenge and one of the
Yeah,
coolest things you ever done. But it just everything, from the food to freezing your butt off. I never took my clothes, my boots, nothing off. When you get in the
yeah.
sleeping bag,
Oh,
you
for
just
eight
pull it over
days.
your head and you know warm up finally. And it was great. Ended up getting some frostbite on my nose and stuff like that. But anyhow, one of those adventures. But
Yeah, that's funny. I'm thinking about, like, how did you even, like, go to the bathroom? Like, that must have been the worst time of your life.
the trick is it's a timing issue.
Yeah,
Because you can't pull them down and sit there and think about it,
yeah.
right? You got to be ready to go. And when you take all those layers off to get to those bib pants, all of a sudden, you want to make sure you're going to
Efficiency.
go, but you don't want to go too soon, but yeah.
Yeah, because you can't get. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah,
But you don't sit out there
that's
and
a real
squat for
problem.
5 minutes and read a magazine while you're waiting for the action to start. I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's a problem. I hope I never have to deal with, I guess. So, well, thank you for that story. That was great. What else do you have for us? I'm sure you got a bunch of other good ones.
The probably the most exciting thing I've had happen is with Cape Buffalo. And we had one that charged, like a legit charge. You see some of the stuff on TV and blah, 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 and where they really
Yeah.
charge and yada, yada. And I've had lots of them that are kind of coming, but this one was, one that was full blown. But the story behind it is the long story, which isn't really in the video. There is a video on YouTube about it. But we had gotten in tight on this buffalo that was sleeping on this mountainside in Tanzania. And when he got up, I had to yell at him to make him stand up. And when he got up, he was quartering away. And he was only at 18 feet, excuse me. Yeah, 18, 20 feet.
Okay.
And when he got up, you can see in the video, he's quartering away. And I'm shooting a 577 nitro. So I figure, he's toast. I'm giving him two, boom, boom. He's not going to go very far. And that's a pretty deadly shot typically,
Yeah.
rather than straight away. So when he gets up, I hammer him, off he goes. So I'm figuring, okay, we'll give him 10, 15 minutes. He's dead somewhere in the brush up ahead. And this is thick jungle. It's not open plains like you might think where buffalo hang out. These
Huh.
old Dugga boys, they'll go into that thick stuff and lay up and just spend, their days after they're not breeding anymore or anything like that. So anyhow, off he goes. Well,
Yeah, when
we
they're done
follow him up.
breeding, they get big, right? They don't lose all that weight chasing girls. They get
Exactly.
big.
That's those
Yeah.
big, heavy ones you see.
Yeah, it's the same with hogs. I saw a castrated hog one time, and he was like a 700-pound hog. I was like, "Holy crap!" And when we killed him, we're like, "Oh, that makes sense. He doesn't have any balls. He's just eating. He's not chasing any of the ladies." So
Yeah, when you cut that part out of your life, I suppose that would really make you put some weight on.
Yeah,
Hopefully, I
I'd be a
never
lot
find
bigger,
out.
right?
Uh,
Go ahead, continue.
but anyhow, so we start following the blood, and there's pretty good blood, but there's also a lot of grass and stomach content because as it's angling away, which is expected.
Yeah.
And we go back and we look on the video to make sure, and yep, it's the shots are perfect. Boom, boom. We follow this thing for an hour and a half in this thick stuff, and he hasn't even laid down yet. He's
Wow.
still moving along, and now he goes into this whole thicket that's kind of like alder brush, if you know what that is from Alaska or places,
Yeah.
Montana has it too, where it's just thick vines and stuff. Well, the buffalo have made tunnels through it. So you can't really stand up. You're kind of crouching. And I'm following the tracker who's got a spear. The pH has gone up around to get a high point to see if he can see it down in this cut that it's in. And we wade in, and I'm, going along with my 577, dragging it through the dirt on my hands and knees, looking for this thing, and we keep finding pools of blood. So I'm thinking at any point, he's got to be here somewhere.
Yeah.
7 hours later of doing this,
What was the total
we,
distance, you think?
not a mile,
Okay.
so it's inch by inch, thinking
Gotcha.
he's going to
Okay.
come at any minute. So in we go, plus got a cameraman who's coming along behind me. We get to this point where it kind of opens up a little bit so we can get out, stand up. And I'm like, oh my, thank God, I can finally stand up and stretch. So
Yeah.
we're there, and Skulk, Tate, my PH, he's up on this ridge, and he's with his arm going like this, pointing down in front of us. So, after being with him for 20 years, I know that means that buffalo's somewhere up in front of us. As we step forward, the other tracker, Nakadana, had come in, and he finds blood that literally is, steaming fresh. It's right now blood. And
Yeah.
just as he looks down, this buffalo, it woofs before they come. And that's typical of buffalo. They'll make like a like that. The good news is they're so heavy that when they're coming, it sounds like a freight train. There's a lot of noise,
Little
like a
warning.
horse or a bull,
Yeah.
coming. And that gave you that nanosecond to come up and know where he's coming from because it's so thick, we couldn't see him. And unfortunately, on the video, I let him have it as soon as his head came through the brush. I wasn't waiting for a full body shot,
Yeah.
at 8 yards that this thing was going to be, coming full tilt. So luckily I hit him between the eyes with the first one, and the second one, just in his skull plate. And here again with the 577.
Yeah.
And it was one of those deals that it took about an hour for it to sink in, and then your guts didn't feel good. You got the shakes.
Yeah.
It was an emotional event in your life that was it's kind of hard to describe. When it happened, everything was fine. Woo, took pictures and
Reaction.
all that.
Yeah.
By the time we got the truck in and started skinning the thing up and everything else, my hands started to shake, and I was
I bet the guy
sweating.
holding the spear was like, "What am I doing here with just a spear? Like, what am I doing?
Uh,
What do I think I'm going to accomplish with this thing?"
Yeah, and I kept looking at him like, "What are you going to do if it comes down this tunnel?" And I'm trying to tell him. Luckily, I can speak pretty decent Swahili, but I'm telling you get out of the way, huh? Move, because I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to shoot
Right.
him from a crouch. But
Gosh,
anyhow, yeah,
man.
that was a pretty cool event. One I don't want to happen again, by the way.
I bet. I bet. So let me ask, did you get a look at what happened with the first two shots? Like, how do you make it for 7 hours? You said he was like 20 feet. So,
So interesting story. I was using at the time the with the 577 being an old rifle and the caliber. I was using these old soft bullets, and I'd had a little bit of a performance issue with them before because they were opening up too much.
okay.
And so imagine that 577 is about the size of a 20 gauge shotgun shell,
Yeah.
a 650 grain bullet, and it was opening up, so it was about this big, which is what inch
Silver
and a
dollar.
quarter. Yeah,
Yeah.
almost a silver dollar size. Well, the bullets when they went in, they expanded and they never left its paunch.
Huh.
So where a normal solid or like a Barnes triple shock or not expanding so much bullet, it should have gone through to his far shoulder, and that would have crippled him from there. And but these bullets opened up so much that we found them both in the guts. They because of all that mass of
Yeah.
grass and everything else that's in them. So as I say, it was a good shot. That it's just bad bullet performance, and needless
Interesting.
to say, that's the last time I ever used those bullets.
Yeah, all right. Do you think that it was like given enough time and the amount of blood that he had lost, maybe he would have where they were kill shots, or do you think that he probably would have been able to sort of
Yeah,
walk that one
he
off?
something had been clipped because there was quite a bit of blood.
Yeah,
And I'm sure eventually, with him getting weak,
yeah,
lions would have got him for sure at some point, or hyenas.
yeah,
But yeah, it was. There was enough blood you could follow it, and if you can follow blood for 7 hours, my guess is the animal's going to die sooner or
yeah,
later. And just felt. Yeah, and of course, you feel so bad. When you wound something like that, such a
yeah,
majestic animal, and had never had that happen before, where we had a penetration issue, but I guess when you shoot a broadside, you never thought about it because that opening, behind the shoulder, you didn't mind them opening up because it's devastating all kinds of stuff as a bullet goes through them. But
huh. That's
so
very interesting. Let me ask. So I do more archery hunting. Would you ever suggest? Have you seen people kill a water buffalo with a bow, or would you just say big caliber guns are really the way to go?
no, Cape Buffalo. There's been quite a few of them killed with bows. Miranda, Ricardo Longoria, guys like
Hmm.
that.
Okay.
Now I'm talking about wild buffalo in Tanzania or Zambia, that kind of thing. There's a lot of them that get shot in South Africa with a bow, but those are fenced. Most of the time, the
Gotcha.
South African ones are fenced. They're still wild and crazy, and I'm not saying don't go do it, but it's a lot harder to get them out in the open, especially if you're hunting them in the hillsides or in the open plains. Worse yet, you can't get close to them because if they're like, say, in Moyawasi, where it's grassland as far as you can see that's knee high, it's
Yeah.
pretty hard to sneak up on them, with a bow. So,
Yeah. I imagine so.
but
Okay. Cool.
talk about sporty.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
you stick them with a bow.
I mean, it's not the same animal, but I'm really trying hard to get a archery antelope pronghorn, and so it's like just far as you can see, flat ground, and the grass isn't even waist high; it's ankle high. And I'm trying to chase after these animals. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get this done, but I'm determined to eventually get an archery antelope, and hopefully
Yeah,
not just sit in a blind somewhere. That's my goal. That's a bucket list accomplishment for me. But we'll see. I'm actually going out a week from today, so we'll
awesome.
see.
And I
We'll
think
see
with
if I
the
can get it done.
antelope, we used to have some at my ranch in Montana. And if you can find a ravine or something that'll get you close, at least you got a chance to, do the sneaky sneak. And, or if you see them coming and going from water and there's a place, where you can, waylay them in a cut or a wash or something like that, a guy has a pretty good chance. But, those old bucks seem to be hip to the program that they ain't going anywhere near a cut.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
They,
man, it's so funny because whenever I've done it a couple times before, and it just seems like the antelope hang out at about 130 yards. They're like, "Oh, he's got a bow. We're good." Like they just won't let me. They won't let me quite into bow range. I'm like, man, if I had a rifle, they're just standing there. Like, why? But it just seems like they just know exactly what I'm trying to do and just stay at the perfect distance so they can keep their eyes on me, and I can't do anything about it.
and when you got a rifle, they know to stand at 500 yards.
Probably,
Yeah,
probably. I've never done that, but I wouldn't be surprised. So.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, that was
That's
another
good.
great story, man. Let me ask you, do you have many stories of like just cuz I know you do a lot of the around the world stuff. Do you have anything more domestic? Any memorable like North American hunting stories, elk, moose, pronghorn?
Yeah, moose. I'm glad you mentioned moose. I had the pleasure of hunting up in northern BC
Okay.
for this is not one that we have filmed. This is before filming days, but uh, we were. I was helping out a buddy of mine up there that has a concession, and he's got stone sheep and all the other, caribou and all those things. But he said, I've got some areas that we never get anybody into where we've got really good moose, but it's going to be a bitch, to get there, to get out of
Yeah.
there. There's no easy way to do it. But you're young and dumb, you'll do it.
Yeah.
I go, don't we have one where you can fly an airplane in and drop me off, and we can shoot them from the shoreline or something? And so anyhow, so he dropped me off on this lake with a kid, and then there was another guy that was there too that was a professional hunter or guide.
Yeah.
And their job was to round up these horses for the last hunt of the year and move them down to the low country where they have their main corrals and stuff to keep them, so the horses they catch them for the winter.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately I have quite a bit of experience with horses. So we were rounding up all these, basically wild horses that they saddle up every once in a while, maybe twice a year. So we get a hold of them, put some bells on them, and we got grain, so you can kind of bait them up. All you horse people out there will appreciate that. So we moved the horses, and it was a 5-day deal to move them from where they were down to where we were going to go. And as we went through this area, about halfway, we got into an area where you could hear the moose bellowing back and forth, and it was perfect time of year. The rut was on, and where they were at, there was so much blowdown of big timber and stuff. There was no way you could get horses in there. But now we've got to hobble all these horses to, if we're going to go in there and try and get one of these moose, we got to get all these horses together again, rope them up, and it's a nightmare, right? They're going to get loose. They're going to disappear. So it's, but anyhow,
Yeah.
all of a sudden we're sitting there deciding what we're going to do. And this one lets out a call. The guide with his hands does the call back, that kind of a noise. And this thing lights up and it starts coming towards us. And we can see his horns in the sunshine, even in this brush at, I don't know what it was, 800-900 yards at that point.
Wow.
But these
That's
big
so cool.
babbles. And you're like, holy crap. I mean, that's the moose that dreams are made of. And the BC moose typically are smaller than the Alaska Yukon moose.
Is body size, antlers, or both?
Both.
Okay.
And this thing, and I've shot a lot of moose in Alaska. I used to live up there, but this is the biggest moose I've ever seen.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So long story short, we tie all these horses up real quick as best we can. We leave the one kid there to keep an eye on him, keep the binoculars on this bull. We start going through the brush, and the more noise we're making as we're climbing over these logs and stuff, I guess this moose thinks that we're a competitor for his girls. So he just keeps coming and coming and coming. We did have to go in about 300 yards before we got an opening where, he would at least come. But
yeah,
you talk about exciting when you got that big moose. It looked like one of those Jim Shockey shows where the moose comes right to you and starts making a big, ruckus in that. And all of a sudden, in the timber, he just came out, gave us a wide open shot, 375 in the shoulder. But now
that's amazing.
That 300 yards of getting what they weigh, 1,500 pounds or whatever a moose weighs. And of course, you got to take everything, except the guts. Of course.
Yeah, strip the ribs, all that stuff.
Yep, all the meat, and except the hooves and the back skin, but cape them out and all that. So 2 days later, we finally get all the horses, loaded up with all the meat. Had a big fire going. We made a great camp. You had all this blown down timber, so we had a fire that would have set New York City on fire had it got loose. And raining on us, but man, I just kept walking over by the fire, looking at these antlers, going, "Holy crap!"
Yeah, it's like you could take a bath in them. They're just so big, just giant balls. That's an amazing visual. I'm jealous. I have a cow moose tag this year, which I'm pretty excited for. But someday my bucket list is to get up there to the Great White North and put down a Yukon moose of some kind. I don't care if it's BC or Alaska.
You got a Colorado moose tag?
Colorado cow moose tag. Yep.
Hey, great eating. One of the
Hmm.
best meats on the face of the earth. Congratulations. That's a hard
Thank
tag
you.
to
Yeah,
get.
and in the same unit, I shot a bull elk in last year, and I tell you what, at least 3 different stocks on elk, a moose spooked the elk out. So I'm feeling pretty confident. I don't want to feel too confident, but frankly, I owe it to those moose at this point. So
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Hopefully you get him somewhere near a road or at least a decent trail you can get a nag into.
right? Yeah, I've got a couple friends. I invited one gentleman. There's in Colorado here. There's like a pack out challenge, and they do them like they did one on the western slope, and they did one in Denver, and they did it in New Mexico, and they basically throw. You have to pack out the weight of a full elk, and it's a race. And this guy won it at every single event, and then they had the championship like 2 weeks ago. And he's a littler guy, like he's not huge by any means, but he just has this motor. So I was like, hey, buddy, you wanna come with me on my moose hunt? So I'm bringing some help, that's for sure.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, I know I only booked you for an hour, and we're coming up on that, and I want to be respectful of your time, sir. But I will listen to your stories all day if you'll let me. So it's up to you if you want to tell some more stories, if you have any more in mind, or if you just want to wrap it up and maybe tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, it's been great to be on the show today. Hopefully, we can do it again and
Absolutely.
put some more together. I love your podcast, by the way. Been some great stories, and I know everybody's tuning in, and the show's doing great. And
I
I hope
appreciate
everybody
that.
will tune in to Rugged Expeditions on YouTube and that, or you can go to our website, jallensmith.com. And remember, Alan is spelled like Alain. My mom's French, so I got the French
Ah,
version of it. That's how the ALAIN came in. But yeah, looking forward to the next adventure. And this has been great.
yeah, this has been fun, and I'm sure I'll get you back on again sometime soon, because I have a feeling you have more than just 3 great hunting stories. So, Alan, thank you so much. I'll put links to your show and everything I can find in the show notes. So, guys, please go check out his YouTube channel if nothing else. Like I said, a lot of fun episodes on there. Comment Hunting Stories podcast so he knows that we sent you. But Alan, thank you, man. I really appreciate your time. And good luck with all the break-ins in Washington. Hopefully we can get that nipped in the butt and get you back to hunting.
Sounds great. Good luck on this fall.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, guys, that's it. Another couple stories in the books. Again, thank you so much for Alan for reaching out, for taking time from your busy day. I know that we had a lot of craziness when we were trying to kind of schedule the podcast. So thank you, sir. I really do appreciate you. As for you listeners, please check him out. Like, go to his YouTube page. I got a link to it in the show notes when you're there. Put hunting stories in the comments so he knows that we're sending people his way. He's got some fun stories, plane crashes, crazy animals, everything you'd ever want. So it's a lot of fun, and if you haven't watched Rugged Expeditions, you need to start now. Make sure you subscribe to him as well, and while you're doing that, check us out on whatever you're listening to now. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you share, and that's it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now get out there and make some stories of your own. Thank you.